After 20 years of no smiles, CEO's incredible transformation begins with secretaries touching, so. Thomas stared blankly at the walls of his expansive corner office, devoid of any warmth or laughter. 2 decades had washed over him since life's joy last graced his face, and now, at 45, he felt every minute of that absence. His father's tragic death turned his world inside out and left him ensnared in a relentless pursuit of success that felt like running on a treadmill, always moving, but never getting anywhere. The shiny plaques and accolades decorating his office were hollow trophies, reminders of ambition achieved at the cost of happiness. Each day was a cycle of meetings, deadlines, and financial reports, all framed in a cold ambition that pushed deeper his sense of isolation. Sarah, ever observant, moved quietly around the office, the clutter of Thomas's disheveled work life, revealing just how far removed he was from the man he once could have been. After years battling her own burdens, each student loan payment a fresh weight on her heart, she began to spot the cracks in Thomas's armor. The slight frown lines etched into his forehead, the forced smile when acknowledging a job well done. It made her heart ache, made her question what really defines success. Is it the cold steel of profit margins, or the warmth of genuine connection? As the evening sun dipped below the city skyline, illuminating the space in a golden hue, Sarah decided to confront the overlooked heart behind the CEO's facade. She retrieved an old photograph she'd found tucked away on his desk, an image of a beaming young man, hands on the hood of a car, laughter radiating like a beacon of hope. His father, the mechanic, exuding pride and joy, a stark contrast to the man Thomas had become. She placed it gently before him, taking a breath to steady her racing heart. "Thomas, I thought you might want to see this." She spoke softly, her voice slicing through the silence. The shift in his expression hit her like a tidal wave. His eyes flickered, recognition wrapping around his heart, and she could almost see the memories flow behind those icy blues. This simple gesture sent a bolt of electricity through the room, unraveling the carefully knitted threads of emotional neglect he had lived within for so long. Internal chaos ripped through Thomas as fragments of laughter and childlike wonder cascaded into his mind. A clumsy joy fought to rise, yet the shadow of his corporate identity threatened to engulf him. Vulnerability was terrifying in a world that rewards precision and profit, and with every laugh shared with Sarah, his confidence surged yet waned. The notion of letting someone get closer terrified him. What if those light moments faded into silence like those before them? What if her laugh was another reason to falter? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The shift in Thomas was palpable. Behind his steel-like facade was a pulsing heart waiting to break free. He found himself teetering on the precipice of making an unprecedented choice, an avenue shifting from cold calculations to cultivating warmth. Yet deep within, a gripping fear echoed. If he embraced this newfound connection with Sarah, wouldn't he also bring ruin to his meticulously constructed empire? Hundreds relied on him, the core of his ambition built on profit rather than people. With every heartbeat, the realization dawned heavier. Love could lead to joy, a refreshing contrast to the numbness he'd become accustomed to, yet it could also shatter the only world he knew. As the office dimmed, shadows of doubt danced on the walls, leaving a cacophony of thoughts unsettling his mind. He was caught in a cycle where happiness stood at odds against the life he had sacrificed so much to uphold, the darkness of his past thrumming louder beneath the surface. Would he continue a legacy defined by profit, or dare to embrace a life colored by laughter? In that fragile moment before the decision fully formed, the tension swelled, leaving both Thomas and Sarah at a crossroads, their lives poised for a change one couldn't yet predict. The silence lingered as Sarah's eyes held Thomas's gaze, urging him to confront the torrent of emotions swirling within him. His heart raced, both exhilarating and terrifying. The photograph's memory remained, whispering promises of a time before despair had wrapped its hands around him. Joy felt foreign, and the idea of reclaiming it seemed almost ridiculous in the light of his responsibilities. Yet something shifted inside him. A tiny flicker of rebellion against the expectations that had shackled him for so long. He had spent years measuring his worth through the lens of financial success. But was that truly enough? Thomas shifted uneasily in his chair, as if each movement gave rise to unspoken questions, the urgency of self-discovery clashing with the pressure of professional duty. "Sarah, His voice faltered. The words threatened to spill forth like a dam breaking, but each syllable felt like a gamble. Could he afford to expose his vulnerability? Or would it unravel the corporate empire he had built? She stepped closer, a silent encouragement. "You don't always have to be in control, Thomas. There's strength in allowing yourself to be human," she offered, her tone soft, yet firm, like a balm on his weary soul. For a moment he allowed himself to envision a life where he was not just the ruthless CEO, but someone who had room for joy and for connection. The sensation felt foreign, yet inviting, a catalyst for change he didn't know he craved. As Sarah's words sunk in, a realization struck him. The true essence of leadership was not found in spreadsheets or profit margins, but in the ability to inspire and connect with others. What if he could lead by example? What if, instead of being the distant figure wielding authority, he became the compassionate force that encouraged those around him to thrive? A surge of determination washed over him. The anxiety that gripped his heart began to recede, replaced by a resolve to take a step into the unknown. Why not explore this human side of himself? He had spent enough time locked in a battle against emotions. Perhaps it was finally time to stop fighting. "I want to change," he admitted, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess himself. "I want to be better, not just as a CEO, but as a person." The corners of Sarah's lips turned upward, hope spilling into the reserved terrain of Thomas's heart. "That's the first step. You can't walk this path alone, Thomas. Let me help you." As they shared that moment, intentions woven into the air before them, a faint warmth blossomed within him. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into a vast unknown. The possibility of love, laughter, and a life unfettered by despair beckoned alluringly. The next few days became a whirlwind of revelations. Thomas immersed himself in activities that reminded him of simpler times. He took morning jogs, reconnected with old friends he had neglected, and allowed himself to rediscover the things that once brought him happiness. It felt exhilarating yet terrifying, each choice a brick laid down on a new path, one that diverged from the sterile halls of corporate infrastructure, yet shadows lurked. The deeper Thomas ventured into this personal transformation, the more he faced internal struggles. Old fears resurfaced. Questions of legitimacy gnawed at his progress. Could he balance this new version of himself with the demands of his role? Would his colleagues accept a softer leader who valued connection over profit? The anxiety churned beneath the surface, whispering caution into his ambitious heart. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, the weight of doubt threatened to crush him. A file on his desk caught his eye. Charts and projections encased the numbers that had dictated so much of his identity. Would these metrics drown out the laughter he was learning to reclaim? Just then a message pinged on his phone, a simple note from Sarah saying, "I believe in you." With renewed conviction, he contemplated the paradox of love and duty, wondering how to merge the two identities vying for his attention. Could he forge a new legacy, one that harmonized corporate resolve with the richness of human connection? But amid this budding sense of clarity, a new challenge loomed. The phone rang. His board called for an emergency meeting that could jeopardize everything he had worked for. He hesitated, the weight of choices suddenly pressing down on him once more. The time had come to face the men who had always valued profit above all else, including himself. Did he have the courage to unveil the new Thomas to them? Would he be able to carve out a spot for humanity in a room often bred for hard decisions? The path stretched out before him, dark and daunting, yet illuminated by the prospect of what could be. In that moment he understood transformation didn't come without conflict. The air felt charged as Thomas stepped into the conference room, a large oval table dominating the space. Polished to a gleam, it reflected the sharp edges of the corporate world he had navigated for so long, a world that now felt both familiar and suffocating. He knew the board members would be expecting the usual display of confidence, a performance wrapped in the armor of critical data and strategic foresight. However, this time he felt unsteady, the changes within him compelling him to break away from the armor he had worn for years. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice steady yet softer than usual, a realization dawning upon him that vulnerability might carry strength rather than the shame he had long associated with it. Their eyes were a mix of skepticism and curiosity, as if they were bracing for a familiar tune rather than a new melody. "Today, I want to discuss not just numbers, but our impact, not just profit, but purpose." He barely recognized his own words, the shift in language surprising even him. These were not the calculated statements designed to manipulate momentum. Instead, they were raw and unvarnished reflections of his evolving mindset. Murmurs fluttered around the room, brows furrowing and lips pursing in disbelief. He continued, sensing the commotion, yet feeling an undercurrent of resolve within. "As a company, we have valued metrics above our most important asset, our people. We can't measure success solely with numbers. We must connect the work we do with the lives we influence." Directly across the table, Roger, a longtime board member notorious for his cutthroat approach, leaned forward, skepticism clouding his expression. "Are we really discussing feelings here, Thomas? Bottom line, it's about profitability. You know this as well as we do." The tide of doubt that Roger's words sent reverberating through him was unmistakable. A part of Thomas wanted to retreat into the comfort of formidable logic, yet he stood firm. "But what if we could redefine what it means to be profitable? People thrive when they feel valued and understood, and in turn they perform better. Imagine a workforce motivated not just by salaries but by their belief in our mission." The silence that followed was heavy. He had stepped into uncertain territory, a tightrope strung high above the expectation to conform. Still, he felt Sarah's tentative presence beside him. Having discussed strategies and potential responses with her, he found strength. He could almost hear her words echo in his head. Lead by example. Without Sarah's support, this moment would have terrified him, yet oddly, it was liberating. As minutes slipped away in the meeting, Thomas rallied each point with increased fervor, weaving the fabric of his new vision. A culture where dialogue existed alongside decision-making, where collaboration replaced competition. Gradually, he transformed skepticism into contemplation, challenging the board to imagine a future where human connection fostered business success. Yet within that conviction, a gnawing fear flickered like an unwelcome shadow. This was not simply about winning over the board. It was the beginning of a deeper internal transformation. A stark realization emerged. What if they rejected him? What if the applauded qualities of ruthlessness and profit-driven decisions were too entrenched to abandon? After what felt like an eternity, the meeting concluded with cautious openness. Some members were intrigued, while others remained firmly in their corners, visibly resistant to a paradigm shift. As Thomas stepped away, the weight shifted upon his shoulders. He had embraced the discomfort of this brave new world, yet found himself paralyzed by uncertainty. He longed to reach out to Sarah, to share his triumphs and fears. Yet he hesitated, realizing his journey had only just begun. In the solitude of his office, he clung to the hope that he had planted seeds of change. However, the lingering doubts from his board meeting whispered ominously. Could he stay true to this new vision in the face of resistance? Then a knock shattered the silence. It was Sarah, and her smile held a hint of encouragement. But when she spoke, her words weighed heavy with implication. "The board isn't the only challenge you'll face, Thomas. There's someone else who won't take these changes lightly." And with that, a new threat emerged, one rooted deeply in the foundations of his corporate empire. What had begun as an inward journey towards transformation was about to collide with external forces that could challenge everything he hoped to establish. The moment Sarah stepped into the office, her energy flooded the room, sparking a flicker of warmth in the otherwise sterile environment. Thomas felt the tension within him ease slightly, but the weight of her words anchored him. A new challenge awaited, one that he hadn't anticipated, looming ominously on the horizon. "Who's the new threat?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure despite the tightening in his stomach. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her usual confidence giving way to concern. "It's not just one person, it's the entire system. There are factions within the company who thrive on the old ways. They will resist any shift you attempt to make." He nodded, absorbing her caution. A part of him had been aware of the resistance that could surface, but hearing it voiced dulled the glimmer of hope he had harvested from the meeting minutes earlier. "What's our next step?" he inquired, determined not to let fear take over. "We need to create a space for dialogue before anyone feels threatened. Gather feedback, initiate discussions. If they see the benefit before it feels like a mandate, they might come around." Her suggestion resonated deeply in Thomas. It struck a balance between his newfound ideals and practical implementation, bridging the gap between vision and resistance. "Let's organize a town hall," he said, the idea taking root in his mind. "We can open the floor for honest conversations, share what we envision, and invite their input. If they feel they're part of the transformation, it might reduce opposition." "Exactly," Sarah agreed, her enthusiasm infectious. "But you need to be prepared for pushback, particularly from those like Roger. They're not accustomed to sharing the stage." The realization sent a shiver down his spine. Could he handle direct challenges from someone so entrenched in the old regime? The thought of standing in front of the board again, facing Roger's piercing gaze, felt overwhelming. "I have to be willing to engage," he muttered to himself more than to Sarah. "I can't back down now." The loud beating of his heart echoed in his ears as he grasped the magnitude of what lay ahead. In that moment of reflection, Thomas recognized this was not just about transforming his company, but about redefining himself. The fears that wormed through him served a dual purpose. They were threats to confront head-on, yet they also offered an opportunity for growth. With renewed clarity, he mapped out the meeting structure. He would start with a clear purpose, then use honest dialogue as a framework for engagement, allowing others' voices to entwine with his. That evening, he stayed late, sketching out the agenda, infusing optimism into each bullet point. However, even as he wrote, shadows of doubt crept in, whispering that the old guard would never embrace change willingly. What if his attempt to engage only solidified their animosity? When he finally made his way home, he fought against the whirlwind of second-guessing. The following day ushered in a wave of anxiety as he put the town hall invitation together. He crafted personalized notes for each board member, requesting their presence. He hoped that by reaching out, he could chip away at their defenses before stepping into the arena. Later, as he stood at his office window watching the city hum below, a distant siren cut through the haze of his thoughts. It reminded him of the urgent responsibility he felt, both to his vision and to his colleagues. In the days leading up to the town hall, he felt the tension build. Each interaction with board members grew increasingly laden with weight. Smiles were superficial, and small talk felt strained. Thomas felt as though he was teetering on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an unknown abyss. Finally, the day arrived. The conference room buzzed with murmurs as members filed in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and resistance. Taking a deep breath, Thomas stood at the front, heart racing. He had stepped into this role seeking change, and now, more than ever, he needed to embody it. But as he looked at the crowd before him, he realized that today would not merely test his resolve. It would determine whether he could lead a transformative journey or be held captive by the remnants of the past. And amidst the rising tension, a thought bubbled to the surface, stark and unsettling. What if he couldn't inspire them to change? With that in mind, he took his first step toward redefining the conversation, aware that the reactions he would face could irreversibly shape his future. Thomas's voice echoed in the conference room. steady yet laden with an undercurrent of vulnerability. "Thank you for coming. I want to talk about our future together, and the path we can take to enhance our company." As he watched familiar faces stare back at him, he felt the weight of their gazes pressing down, a tangible reminder of the expectations piled upon him. He outlined his vision, pouring his passion into each word. Yet, as he navigated through his presentation, the flickers of doubt loomed over him, an invisible barrier crafted over years of tradition. Eyes glazed over, and Thomas sensed the nonverbal cues of skepticism ripple through the room. They weren't just resistant, they were entrenched, fortified by history, and hardened by years of unwavering policies. After sharing his ideas, Thomas opened the floor for discussion, a moment meant for collaboration but laced with uncertainty. He caught glimpses of body language shifting. The way Roger adjusted his tie, leaning back with an air of superiority, was as telling as his still silence. "Do you really believe this will work?" Roger's voice sliced through the lingering humidity of the room. "This company has thrived on structure for decades. What makes you think your airy visions will stick?" Thomas's heart raced as he felt the collective breath of his colleagues sharpen in anticipation, their eyes flitting to him for answers. He firstly felt stung. This was personal, and yet it was a chance. A crucible for his character. "I believe we can change not only our processes but our mindset and relationships," Thomas countered, allowing a moment of vulnerability to seep through his professionalism. It was a risk he hadn't anticipated earlier, standing firm yet exposed. Creating an environment where we are engaged, where innovation becomes part of our culture, is essential for us to adapt and thrive. But as those words tumbled into the silence, he could sense the air thickening again. Levels of challenge surged, flooding his intention with questioning resistance. "Adapt?" Roger scoffed. "You think we need to fix what isn't broken? Why would we want to shake up everything we've built?" "Because stagnation is a slow death," Thomas responded, fire igniting in his chest. "And while our past has yielded success, we must learn from it and build on it. We owe it to ourselves to recognize that the landscape is changing." Just as Thomas thought he might have a breakthrough, another voice spoke out, echoing Roger's stance. The others joined in, comfortable in their silos. Their discontent churned like a tempest, and Thomas felt the ragged edges of doubt claw at the foundation he had just begun to construct. As the tide of opposition rose, the blaring sirens of regret echoed in his ears, amplifying the fear that enveloped him. What if I fail? What if I can't convince them? In that tumultuous moment, clarity swept through him. He recalled Sarah's insights, the importance of listening, the very heart of genuine dialogue. If he were to galvanize change, he first had to connect, not just confront. "Let's address your concerns," he proposed, raising a hand to ease the escalating storm. "How about we break into groups and discuss what you see as potential risks, and find solutions together?" The apprehensive murmurings quieted, curiosity sparking in their eyes, which shifted from defiance to intrigue. By inviting dialogue instead of further contest, Thomas felt solidarity reaffirming within him. He was learning to wield his vulnerability not as a weapon, but as a bridge. And as discussions began to stir, he nodded in encouragement, realizing that, while the room had not been transformed, seeds of potential were being planted. As the meeting drew to a close, Thomas left with new energy alongside the uncertainty. While he hadn't shifted every mind, he had shifted his own approach, an iteration of growth morphing between fear and determination. Later, as he walked the familiar halls back to his office, Thomas embraced the vulnerability of leadership. He would not become a tyrant of change. Instead, he resolved to harness his uncertainties, reframing them as strengths for ongoing dialogue. But as he sat down to reflect, a nagging question lingered. What if the old guard could never be convinced? What if the weight of legacy proved too heavy to dismantle? With this uncertainty shadowing his thoughts, a burgeoning resolve sparked within him. Thomas knew that the path ahead wouldn't simply involve bold proclamations, but ascertaining his ability to listen as much as lead. Change, he realized, required not just vision but unwavering patience to understand the past before carving out the future. And as darkness fell outside, a flicker of an idea ignited. Perhaps the next step required even deeper exploration within the system, not just for answers, but for hidden strengths yet to be realized. What if gathering hidden perspectives could unlock unforeseen allies? A sense of urgency propelled Thomas as he returned to his desk, the evening light slipping through the blinds and casting long shadows on the polished wood. He could feel the tension still crackling in the air, like static before a storm. The meetings had stirred something deep within him, igniting not just a desire for change but a hunger to seek out the untapped potential within the company. He opened his laptop, heart racing as he scoured through notes taken during the meeting. Roger's skepticism loomed large, but alongside it, he could almost hear the inklings of encouragement from his colleagues, the subtle shifts in their demeanor. If he played his cards right, they could become allies rather than antagonists. Planning his next step required a delicate balance of strategy and empathy. He needed to build on the small victories he'd managed to accomplish. What if he facilitated small group discussions on change by empowering the voices of those who felt unheard? This could breathe life into the stagnant perception of innovation and collaboration. As he envisioned the potential of this approach, Thomas's thoughts drifted to Sarah. Her supportive yet candid guidance echoed in his mind, urging him to foster a genuine atmosphere for dialogue. He decided to invite her to co-host these sessions, seeing in her a natural ability to engage with people on their level, to draw out not just their concerns, but their aspirations. Before he could reach out, however, doubt tightened around his resolve. What if Sarah disagrees? What if she sees this as me trying to seize control? He wrestled with the idea, the very essence of leadership clashing within him. Would he spiral back into the fear that had haunted him in the past? The fear of rejection and failure? In that moment he allowed himself to reflect. Every leader faces risks. To take a step forward sometimes required stepping back to listen. Accepting that uncertainty was part of the process became freeing. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he drafted a message to Sarah, reaching out not as a superior but as a collaborative partner. After sending the email, Thomas felt a weight lift from his chest. He wasn't just asking for her support, he was affirming a belief in shared leadership, an idea that might resonate with his colleagues when bringing them into the fold. The next day, to his surprise, Sarah responded quickly. Her enthusiasm was palpable through the screen, her words flowing with encouragement and creativity. Absolutely. Let's outline these sessions together. I have some ideas about making them more interactive. What if we included icebreakers, or even brainstorming sessions focused on innovation? With Sarah on board, an idea began to crystallize. He envisioned groups breaking free from rigid hierarchies, creating spaces where ideas could intertwine without the dread of judgment. The following weeks became a whirlwind of preparation. They crafted an outline for the sessions, prioritizing transparency and inclusivity. Thomas experienced moments of doubt along the way. What if the old guard was still too entrenched to embrace any form of change? Yet with each challenge overcame, he could feel something shifting within him. He learned that vulnerability could invite others in rather than push them away. At his next meeting, when he presented the concept to the team, he was faster to seek their input. "What do you think of this approach?" he asked, making eye contact with Charlotte, a quieter member of the team who previously might have stayed silent in larger discussions. Her initial hesitation shifted to a spark of curiosity. "It sounds inviting, but how do we ensure everyone feels safe to speak up?" she questioned, which triggered a rich discussion that revealed deep-seated concerns and hidden ideas. The cycle of engagement spread, fostering an environment where dialogues flourished. Slowly but surely, the energy in the room transformed from heavy skepticism to delicate optimism. As the weeks unfolded, sparks of innovation began igniting in pockets around the company. Thomas often saw glimmers of collaboration that had been absent before. Yet with these realizations came new fears. What if the momentum he had built could collapse as swiftly as it had emerged? Determined to keep pushing ahead, he sought feedback consistently, and each response felt like a test. Every twist along the pathway produced ripples of anxiety and hope. But one thought consistently returned. There must be more strength within these walls just waiting to be uncovered. And just as he prepared for another round of discussions with the team, the reality of one lingering question gripped him. What if some transformations would challenge his very capabilities as a leader? With the next session approaching, he felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Was he ready to face what might emerge from those he sought to uplift? As the day of the session dawned, Thomas found himself pacing the break room, a nervous energy propelling him forward. Caffeine coursed through his veins, but it couldn't settle the churning in his stomach. Today was pivotal. This was the moment he had been preparing for, yet doubt clung to him like a shadow. He glanced at the conference room where chairs were set up in a circle, unlike the oppressive rectangles that had defined their past meetings. This arrangement, designed to foster openness, shattered his comfort zone, and its very setup felt like an invitation to vulnerability. What if they didn't respond positively? What if he failed? His thoughts drifted back to the conversations he had had with Sarah in the preceding weeks, the brainstorming sessions filled with enthusiasm, the shared vision of dismantling barriers. She had been a steady guide, encouraging him whenever self-doubt seeped into his mind. But now, without her reassuring presence beside him, he questioned whether he could deliver without her support. With each tick of the clock, time felt less like a resource and more like an impending deadline. The diverse faces of his colleagues loomed in his mind, some curious, others skeptical. He had spent so long focused on their collective voice that he had overlooked the importance of his own. Did they see him as a leader or merely as another cog in the machine? As he entered the room, he was greeted by a mix of familiar smiles and a few raised eyebrows. Swallowing hard, he reminded himself to embrace this uncertainty. Step back, listen, and invite. The words of Sarah echoed in his mind, becoming a mantra he desperately needed. Thank you all for being here today, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. We're here to explore ideas, to talk openly about what innovation means to us, and how we can reshape our work environment for the better. He surveyed the room, searching for glimmers of engagement. Charlotte, sitting across from him, leaned forward, her expression earnest. What's our winning definition of success here? How can we measure the impact of these discussions? Her question sank into the group, piquing interest. As others began to respond, Thomas felt a spark ignite within him, a flicker of hope. Here were people considering the same dreams for their workplace, engaging in a dance of ideas. A deeper dialogue unfolded where hesitations transformed into innovative discussions. Moments passed in a whirl of voices, interwoven with laughter and the occasional gasp of realization. Thomas watched, transfixed, as they built on one another's thoughts, creating a tapestry of possibilities. With every contribution, he was reminded of the value of community within the workplace, even amidst feelings of frustration and despair. Yet as the energy grew, so did a nagging sense of impending challenge lurking on the horizon. The initial excitement could easily wane, straying toward mediocrity if they lost this momentum. How could he, as a leader, ensure that this newfound enthusiasm didn't fade into the background noise of daily tasks? Determined to address the looming question, Thomas initiated a brainstorming goal-setting exercise, inviting everyone to reflect on their aspirations. What do you want to achieve in the next month, and how can we support each other? A buzz of discussion erupted, voices intermingling as everyone animatedly formulated personal and collective goals. But then Thomas noticed Roger's stony silence in the corner. It pierced through the warmth of the room. The vice president had been sullen since the beginning, and his skepticism hung heavily. As the session tightened around shifting ideas and shared dreams, Thomas sensed the tension knit within the room. Would Roger's discontent jeopardize the progress already made? It felt like a fragile glass structure increasingly threatened by the winds of dissent. Determined to acknowledge all perspectives, Thomas sought a moment of calm. Roger, I'd appreciate hearing your thoughts, he said, directly addressing the looming cloud. The room fell silent as eyes turned to Roger, and the weight of anticipation hung in the air. Could this moment become a bridge instead of a barrier? I'm not convinced this is going to lead anywhere, Roger finally spoke, his voice even but laced with intensity. Change takes more than wishful thinking. A hush enveloped the room, and Thomas felt the air thicken with tension. As he prepared to respond, a mix of determination and uncertainty coursed through him. It was now or never. Could he transform Roger's skepticism into insight? With the next few words, he would either fortify the fragile hope building on collaboration or shatter it completely. Thomas felt the weight of Roger's skepticism pressing down on him like a physical weight. The room hung in a tenuous silence, and he knew this was his moment, a chance to reshape the narrative. He inhaled deeply, grounding himself in the present. Change does take more than wishful thinking, Roger, he began, choosing his words carefully. It requires action, yes, but it also starts with belief. Belief in each other and in this process. What I've seen here today is a spark. It's the belief that our voices matter. He scanned the attendees, gauging their reactions. A few nodded thoughtfully while others remained skeptical. This was a pivotal moment for him, not just to defend his ideas but to demonstrate his leadership, his intention to bridge the gap between hope and action. Let's harness that spark. What if we view this as a challenge, not just for ourselves but for our work culture? Pacing slightly, he felt his energy shift to a more assertive stance. What if we commit to one tangible action that stems from our discussions today? Roger's brow furrowed, and Thomas decided to lean into this pushback. I understand your doubts. They're valid. But they also point to something critical. What are we afraid might go wrong? And what could go right instead? A ripple of not just interest but uncomfortable contemplation coursed through the room, and Thomas knew he struck a chord. He could feel the energy shifting, like electric currents sparking renewed vigor as his colleagues wrestled with Roger's challenge alongside him. Charlotte interjected, her voice strong. If we're going to move past this point, I suggest a project to test our ideas. A pilot initiative that we can measure. Instead of aiming for the horizon, let's create small victories that can lead us there. Exactly. Thomas felt the adrenaline surge. What if we form a task force to identify one aspect of our workplace that could be improved? We can set measurable goals, check in weekly, and reassess. It's a commitment to true progress. As they began to brainstorm specifics, he felt Roger's scrutiny soften, the slightest crack in the armor of criticism. I still think it's a long shot, Roger said, his tone less combative. But I'm willing to listen to your ideas. This acknowledgement, however small, filled Thomas with cautious optimism. He had succeeded in momentarily taking the air out of Roger's discontent, refocusing the group on shared potential rather than dissent. It was a small victory, yet it was the first of many he needed to capture. The session transformed into a collaborative whirl of ideas. Conversations bubbled over with enthusiasm as they outlined methods to track their pilot initiative. Voices became more animated again, and all the fears and doubts started to disperse like mist. Yet as they developed these plans, Thomas felt a lingering uneasiness. What would happen when the initial excitement faded? How would he maintain not just momentum, but a thriving culture that supported open dialogue continually rather than just sparking in one session? Before wrapping up, he posed one more question to the group, uncertainty flickering like a candle flame within him. How do we keep this going? How do we ensure that our voices don't get drowned out by the daily grind? The room fell quiet once more, but this time it was anticipation that hung thickly in the air. As he looked around at his colleagues, he realized that their journey had only just begun. Their commitment to ongoing dialogue was essential, and he sensed that his leadership would be continually tested and shaped along the way. As discussions continued, an idea struck him that had been loosely forming in the back of his mind. A potential trip to a conference that focused on innovative workplace strategies. Perhaps this could be their rallying point, a living example beyond their office walls. If they could make it happen, it would solidify their bond. But as excitement bubbled, he could feel uncertainty creeping in once again. Would the decision to push for that trip be seen as optimistic empowerment or naive overreach? He would have to make a decision, and time was not on his side. The next meeting loomed, and he wondered if perhaps that trip could be the fulcrum that tilted their collective hope toward genuine, lasting change. As the meeting concluded, the question burned in the back of his mind. Would he dare to propose that leap, or would fear grip him once again, leaving their momentum hanging precariously in the balance? Thomas spent the night mulling over the day's discussions, each thought ricocheting off the walls of his mind. He felt the excitement still throbbing in his veins, yet the thrill was doused with the weight of indecision. The idea of the conference lingered. The potential for transformation was palpable, but would he have the courage to champion it? As dawn broke, he poured himself a cup of coffee, its warmth comforting against the lingering chill of uncertainty. It struck him that hesitation only bred stagnation, a hush of inaction that suffocated progress. He needed to resolve this inner turmoil. So he set about crafting an email, a tentative proposal to the team. His heart raced as he pressed send, a small shot of adrenaline flowing with the release. At the office, he walked into a different atmosphere. The energy was palpable, charged with the spirit of collaboration they had ignited. Charlotte caught his eye and smiled, an unspoken understanding passing between them, her nod encouraging him onward. He approached the gathering group, feeling both empowered and vulnerable. "Can I get everyone's attention for a moment?" he began, commanded by an unseen force. "I've been thinking more about our discussions from yesterday. I want to propose an idea, a trip to a conference that focuses on innovative strategies in workplace dynamics. It could solidify what we've started and inspire further actions." A murmur rippled through the crowd, mixed reactions painting their faces. Roger's skepticism was front and center. What's to say that a trip will yield tangible results? We must be practical and realistic here. "Isn't that the point?" Thomas replied, meeting Roger's stare head-on. "To step outside our comfort zone to challenge our status quo? We owe it to ourselves to find out." Charlotte chimed in. "We could learn new frameworks, bring back strategies that could truly impact our work culture. It's not just a trip, it's an investment in our growth." Encouraged by her support, Thomas took a breath. "I see this as a dual commitment, to each other and to our development. And what if we structure it around our pilot initiative? We could hold ourselves accountable to bring actionable insights back, so we'd be ensuring our time is well spent." As discussions swirled, he sensed a flickering change in the group's dynamics. Ideas began to build off one another like a wave. Proposals for funding, logistics, and tasks divided among those willing to pioneer this journey. Yet even within the rising tide of enthusiasm, Thomas couldn't shake the doubt gnawing at him, the fear of taking on too much too soon. What if it became a distraction? What if the thrill faded, replaced again by skepticism and disillusionment? He examined their fervor, the way they rallied, and felt a distinct pull. Was it truly the thrill of learning that ignited them, or simply the allure of an escape from routine? As he pushed these questions aside, he understood something deeper was at play. He was simultaneously leading and testing his own resilience. The atmosphere shifted yet again, conversations mixing with laughter, a bright, vibrant cacophony that hadn't resonated in the office for far too long. For Thomas, this was a revelation. He realized that while a trip would provide insights, the real transformation was already happening in the workplace. But could this momentum last once the newness wore off? Just as quickly as excitement surged, a hint of panic tightened his chest. Was he merely setting up the group for disappointment down the line? As the meeting drew to a close, he made a quiet vow to himself. He would do everything within his power to keep their voices alive, to foster an environment where innovation would flourish long after the conference had ended. But doubt lingered. Could he navigate this complex landscape of aspiration and reality? And when the moment of truth arrived, would his own conviction hold steady or waver beneath the pressures of expectations? With a final glance at his team, a sense of determination ignited within him. He had to prepare deeper than merely sending them into the world. He had to be ready to lead them through all the challenges ahead. And with that realization, the question loomed heavy in his mind. Would he have the fortitude to sustain this evolution, or would the journey unravel as quickly as it had begun? The conference room was abuzz with anticipation as Thomas gathered his colleagues, determined to channel the momentum they had built into meaningful action. There was a palpable excitement in the air, palpable like electricity, as he prepared to announce the trip to the conference. "Everyone," he began, his voice steady yet filled with determination. "I want to discuss the upcoming conference. We have the potential not just to attend, but to actively reshape our culture." He watched as his words took root in their minds, eyes widening, an understanding dawning. "We won't just be passive learners. We will bring back actionable insights that will set our new vision into motion." Engagement soared as ideas flew across the room. Colleagues began volunteering to take on roles in planning logistics, setting goals for what they aimed to achieve at the conference. Together, they drafted potential topics to explore, research methods to implement their findings upon their return, and shared personal aspirations. In these moments, Thomas felt the warmth of camaraderie blossoming, a stark contrast from the cold isolation of his past. Empowered workforce, thriving culture. These weren't just lofty concepts, they were manifesting before his eyes. He recognized that the bonds forming were an embodiment of a rejuvenated collective ambition. However, just as he was about to revel in this moment, the familiar shadow of doubt crept in. Could this newfound enthusiasm endure beyond the walls of their conference? Would their synergy withstand the challenges waiting on the other side? As Thomas left the meeting, he felt an unfamiliar blend of exhilaration and trepidation. The realization struck him. Leading change was never about rigid structures, but rather nurturing a resilient mindset. Days turned into weeks and the conference loomed closer. Thomas had transformed from a solitary CEO into a rallying leader willing to listen and adapt. Yet within himself, he increasingly acknowledged challenges. The day of the conference arrived rich with promise. Standing at the entrance, Thomas took in the expansive venue filled with animated discussions, spreading ideas like wildfire. As he and his team moved through exhibits and sessions, he leaned into his role, documenting insights while empowering his colleagues to explore their interest. He facilitated dialogues and pushed them to think critically, to challenge the status quo. Every conversation reinforced his belief that true leadership flowed from connection and understanding. As the days unfolded, he watched his team blossom. Colleagues who had previously hesitated began championing presentations, sharing thoughts fluently, lighting up the room. However, the essence of his own journey started to crystallize amidst these experiences. He didn't just want to witness transformation, he wanted to embody it. By letting go of rigid expectations and embracing authenticity, he found himself reclaiming purpose and presence. Returning to the office, the energy was electric. The ideas generated from the conference sparked discussions that resonated throughout the workplace. What was once a scheme was now a movement, where colleagues rallied for genuine growth and collaboration. As a leader, Thomas demonstrated that leaders who nurture relationships ignited innovation. His board became genuinely intrigued, no longer just resistant but willing to discuss alternatives. Members who once clamored against change began advocating for the ideas rooted in humanity. Recognition followed soon thereafter. The company's commitment to empathy and collaboration set them apart from competitors. Metrics shifted, but not in the way he thought inevitable. The numbers reflected the flourishing dynamic of a culture that had shifted from profit first to people first. In weekly meetings, Thomas felt a renewed confidence. Numbers that represented profits bore the weight of stories of colleagues thriving, creativity unleashed, and a culture flourishing from intrinsic motivation. Recognition came from industry peers, praised not for mere profits but the collective voices that embodied shifting narratives in corporate culture. At an event celebrating their transformation, Thomas stood before his colleagues, feeling an invisible tether binding them together. He shared his journey, a narrative crafted with vulnerability, acknowledging setbacks, opportunities for growth, and above all, the power of connection. "I was once a titan built on ambition yet starved of joy," he declared. "Today, we are not just a company. We are a community. We advocate for one another because the future ties us together." Elation filled the room, not just because of corporate success, but their shared triumph over individual challenges. He felt whole at that moment, not just professionally fulfilled, but personally transformed. Thomas had become a beacon, not just guiding a corporate ship, but fostering a culture where individual voices flourished. As the claps resonated around him, he understood it was not mere validation of success, but a testament to genuine transformation, a journey filled with purpose. He had achieved not just professional recognition but also personal fulfillment. He conquered the pervasive isolation from years of ambition and emerged as a leader capable of inspiring others. The walls of doubt had crumbled, replaced with a stronger foundation built on understanding, trust, and collective growth. This victory didn't mark an end. It was an invitation to continue evolving. His achievements resonated deeply as he fostered ongoing dialogue, nurturing shared visions that intertwined company direction with empathy. He had finally embraced the duality of leadership, leading not just with authority but with heart. The path remained ahead, vibrant and uncharted, emphasizing that leadership is not a destination but a journey, ever growing, ever learning. He took a deep breath, satisfaction coursing through him, and knew undeniably this was but the beginning. Now I need you all to act. Don't let this moment pass you by. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep more inspiring tales coming your way. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible journey of transformation, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how overcoming personal struggles can change lives. This is the moment to show your support. Support what truly matters. Don't wait even one more second.